forget the war.
Think about how it could be. A new mindset has arrived, where to share has become our greatest power.
It is this energy that guides us, will enlighten us, where meaning and purpose is a flame.
Burn inside every soul on the planet.
Welcome to the human-to-human model, uniting and inspiring leaders globally to build together with meaningfulness and joy.
Opening new possibilities for people.
Anticipating disruption. Rethinking society.
Who will reach their potential because the future is today.
Join us to build a sustainable plus 100 world.
I think right now is clearly the way to act. Lack of clean energy will affect the Earth's core later.
I find that when people begin making small changes, they gradually get bigger because they get this feeling, I am doing something.
So we moved from greed-based civilization to human value-based civilization. Making money is a happiness. Making other people happy is a super happiness.
Wondering about your future? So bring your DNA to us today.
And then if you have some time, you can later check also the networking system, how does it work? Even you can copy and use in your industry, no problem, yes, because as I said, the more we spread, then we have the most our industry, yes? And let me, okay. Mary, I hope she will join because she's from Boston, so it's 5 a.m. And it's very interesting because we named her Solar Mama, but it's the only woman in US who owns a 7 gigawatt wind park. So let's see if Mary is joining. If not, maybe it was too early. So I think that today is a very historical moment for us because we started as a solar business club, and then now we are becoming CleanTech business club, and we never tackled the topic of wind. And for me, to be honest, it's quite a new topic. And I'm really honored that Stefan, because we are so busy with everything, that you agreed to put it, in such a short notice. And I would like to thank you. So the goal is today really to see how, you see, with the whole disruption, negative disruption that we have, how we can still tackle the business. Yes, and I think that even more important is how we can turn this negative disruption into a positive disruption. And do you still feel that there is a place for wind? Yes, because for me, I will be very honest with you. For me, I think when you consider the applications of solar and also the diversity of applications, and now the price decline, me personally, I think that the biggest, let's say, share in the renewables will be for solar. Yes, but I would like to ask you, because for me it's a new topic, if you can eventually persuade me and also viewers that there is still place for wind, and why do you believe so? And no matter what will be the conclusion, I would be really honored if we can work together in the future. So Stefan, now I give you the floor to introduce the speakers, and please feel free. We have almost 1 hour. We need to be quite sharp with the timing because the next session on storage will start at 12. So thank you so much, Stefan, and please, the floor is yours.
Good. Thank you very much, Thomas, for this kind of introduction. And if you allow me to share my screen, okay, I would just build on what you've just
1 second.
Told me. Indeed, I mean, I have attended some of your meetings in Abu Dhabi, of course, noticing that you're working a lot with the solar sector and not so much with the wind sector. So once I spoke and I was the only wind person there. It's a pleasure to be here with you, as I'm not only working for wind, but I'm also a vice chair of the Global 100% Renewable Energy Platform. That's I see as our mission. I think that's certainly the mission that brings us together. We are aiming at 100% renewable energy future, and we still need to find out what will be the share of the different technologies. Now, let's see, and I'm very glad we have Chami Hossein with us, because later, maybe Chami, you've not prepared for that topic, but Chami, as the technical chair of the WWA, had prepared a while ago a kind of global scenario which share wind energy could have. We don't know what the future will be, but for sure, wind and solar together will have to bear the lion's share of the future energy supply. Now, let me start with my presentation, giving you a global overview. And I understand, Thomas, that's right, that we are now next to Khalid Benhamou, Jami Hossain, myself. We are 3 speakers, right?
Yes, yes.
So no need to kind of to be too short. So giving you now what's happening on my screen is black. Ah, okay. Can you see my screen? Are you?
Yes, yes.
You can hear me also, good, because I just see my presentation now and don't see you. Okay. Well, with Energy Association, we are based, and that's where I'm at the moment. We are based in Bonn, close to the UN campus. Everything is closed at this point of time. UN Climate Secretariat is actually like 200-300 meters away from us. But UN Climate Secretariat, everybody works from home office. We started moving here. Actually, we started in 2004. That's 16 years ago now. And actually, we had the COP in 2017 was held just also next door from us here. So we are a global umbrella organizations. We member organization with members in more than 100 countries. We usually have an annual World Wind Energy Conference. This year will be the first year that we will not have a physical conference. We were planning to have it in Korea, but the Koreans decided together with us that we have to postpone that. So let me come to the main topic, the global situation of wind power. These are the added capacities of the last 4 years. And as you see, the year 2019 was still okay with close to 60 gigawatt of capacity added to the global capacity. That in terms of capacity is less than solar energy added last year, but it seems that in terms of power output of actually energy, wind energy is still adding more than the solar sector. Also, I'm not sad if solar is, of course, also getting higher shares. The growth rates went down the last couple of years, but last year, again, with the growth rate of a little bit over 10%, was not bad. Although, of course, when we look at in particular the Paris goals, we have to even accelerate that. Total installed capacity end of 2019 reached 650.8 gigawatt. So you see since 2013, we more than doubled the global.
Stefan, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure you're on presentation mode. We see all your slides. We don't see the presentation itself.
Okay, that's a bit. Sharing is paused. Thomas is not here. What can I do here?
Oh, no, I'm here.
Resume share. Okay.
Sorry. It means if I put on stop video, it stops your video.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see how this is.
Can you see all the participants now? The Stefan.
Yeah. Now I think it's. Okay. So did you see that these slides here? That was the added capacity. We have the growth rates here of the last 4 years, and here is the total development. So since 2013, we have more than doubled the global installed wind capacity. Here you can see, I think that's an interesting one, just to see this in terms of the quantity in relation of the different continents. So Asia is now far above Europe. North America is following, and then we have regions where probably solar has higher growth rates, for example, in African countries, but also we see 5 gigawatt now installed in African countries. We hear a little bit later from the North African colleague from Morocco, how the market is developing in the northern part of Africa, at least. So you look at the leading 8 markets, in particular, China was performing very well 2019 with 27,000 megawatt installed within a year. US market was also performing very well. Some of the European markets were suffering, in particular Germany, with the market compared to 2 years ago collapsed by almost 80%. This, by the way, was presented in detail at a webinar that we had last week. So people who are interested in details of those markets, they can also go to our website and then they find all the detailed information there. Beside from my 2 colleagues here who will present some of the world regions in detail. Now, when we speak about the current situation with the coronavirus, and when you look at these countries here, including now Brazil, China, France, Germany, India, Spain, United Kingdom, and US, these are the countries which are hardest hit by the coronavirus. So that already tells us something about what is the situation at this point of time. And then what we heard from all the representatives is, of course, that the situation at this point of time has a major impact on at first on workforce, because people cannot go to work in many countries, so they cannot go to build, assemble wind turbines, but also to install wind turbines is at the moment in many countries not possible. One part is the kind of the local supply chain, the local workforce. The second part is also international supply chain. And what we heard, for example, from our Chinese colleagues, that although they are kind of local activities or domestic activities are now again starting, but even China, where you expect there is a large domestic supply chain, they're suffering because they do not get some of the parts that they need from abroad. For example, factories in Spain, some also in Germany, where they still need to get some parts, supply chain is interrupted. So for sure, 2020 will be a tough year for the wind sector, and we will not be where we landed end of 2019. The installed capacity by country, just very briefly here, is of course dominated by China with, at this point of time, we're coming close to 250,000 megawatt. And as I said, a total capacity of 650 gigawatt. Very briefly, the small wind market, because we as a World Association not only look into the large wind turbines, the small turbines, which we've defined at up to 100 kilowatt. So this is rather competing with smaller PV installations. This is the number of installed units around the world, and you see that the market size is not so small. More than 1 million of these units have been installed around the world by 2018. It's a bit more challenging to get statistics for that. That's why we have a delay here always of 1 year. But if you imagine that every unit is supplying a number of people, you see that millions of people around the world are at this point of time getting their power from small wind turbines. China is here even more dominating the market than in the case of large wind turbines, of course, because a lot of the manufacturing takes place in China. So even international manufacturers, they are usually getting their products, they have their factories in China. And China, followed by the United States, which doesn't have such a small market, but it's also getting very interesting, for example, Russia, where you do not have sun all over the year. And one aspect that I think we should not overlook is the kind of socioeconomic dimension of wind power, similar like in solar, but maybe even more relevant because, well, everybody knows there's this discussion that people living close by a wind farm, they don't like it. And we know that there are such problems with, some people call it acceptance. And we also know that the best way how people like wind turbines is that they are behind the wind farm. So we believe, and that's why we have a special focus on that, that what we call community power is a key to even accelerate a deployment of wind farms around the world. Because if people have a concrete benefit, economic benefit, if they take part in the decision-making process of a project, then of course they not only accept the turbines, but they want more because it brings them income. Community power, as we define it, means that actually really the wind farm is owned by locals, that voting control is with the locals, and that also the profit stays with the locals. So we have a definition saying that if 2 out of the 3 is by majority with the local population, then we call this a community wind farm. And that of course applies also to solar, but of course in solar with smaller installations, often that is automatically the case. Yeah, at the end, coming back to where we started talking, Thomas, the answer to our crisis that we're facing, to the not only the corona crisis, but the 2 crises, the climate crisis, is certainly 100% renewables. We need 100% renewables to bring greenhouse gas emissions down to zero. We also have at the moment very weird situation at the oil market, which is not good, whether some people now are happy that the fuel price is low or not, but this up and down is certainly not healthy for an economy. So an answer to this is certainly price stability through renewables, domestic renewables, but also when we look at air pollution, etc., it has a deep impact on the health of people. Answer to both is renewables. With that, I come to the end of my introduction. Thank you for the time being. And as I said, more details about the countries that are not presented by the next speakers can also be found on our website, where we will have the next webinar, by the way, on community power in 10 days. So with this, thank you. Let me then stop sharing. And I would then hand over to our next speaker. Now it's probably up to me to decide.
Yes, yes, you are the boss, you know.
I think we start just like we're coming from east to west. And I would then introduce Chami Hossain, Dr. Chami Hossain, who's been one of the pioneers of wind power in India, literally. He started working in the wind industry, Thomas mentioned, in 1985, when many of us maybe went to school or did many things, but not thinking of solar or wind power. Chami worked for companies, for large wind turbine manufacturers. He had also an important role in the Indian Wind Energy Association. He created several companies. He knows the sector from all perspectives. He also used to work for TERI as a professor. So he knows science, the practical aspects, the business, and the associations. Mm-hmm. I'm very happy that we have Chami now with us. He has a role in the World Wind Energy Association as technical chair, board member, vice president, and he will present us the Indian market and also say a few words about other South Asian countries. So, Chami, I hand over to you.
Now you can hear me? Yeah, okay.
Do you have some slides, or just we would like to speak?
Yeah, I have some slides, so I will share this.
Okay. So I give you the rights. If Stefan agrees, of course he agrees. No choice. So now you are able to share the slides.
Okay.
And it's really an honor to have wind pioneer, because we are working always with solar pioneers, and now to have also wind pioneer with us.
Yeah, I'm seeing where I had seen sometime back.
So there is a button, green button on, on the bar, which is on the bottom.
Okay, yeah. Right.
Amazing. So we can see.
Okay, you can see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just begin with somewhere that you started your talk about, which was whether solar and wind, or whether both can work in the future. You see, the solar and wind, they are almost, in terms of costs, they are almost neck to neck. We had some time back some auctions in India, and they were very, very aggressive auctioning that happened here. And the solar tariffs were around 2.42 rupees per kilowatt hour. That was the lowest. And wind tariff went down to something like 2.44. They are neck to neck almost. Then the solar tariffs or solar costs also depend on wind speeds. So if you have very good sites, you can probably compete better than solar also. And if you do not have very good sites, then it is more or less similar, or it can be also bad, because if you don't have winds, then you cannot generate that much. The other aspect of solar versus wind is that all across the world, solar will only peak during the noon time. So if you are in a country which is something like Germany or France, or even in India, most of the power that we will get from a solar plant will be sometime around 2 p.m., 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. during the day. And that is some issue for the grid to have all that power at one time and then to use it at other times and to, adjust it with the load profile. But wind, more or less, it blows even in the evening, it blows in the night. And so there can be a very good combination of wind and solar. So I thought this would address to some extent your question that it is not just one technology that is the solution for 100% RE, but many other technologies. But most importantly, solar and wind, which are the major technologies today, are going to be there for 100% renewable energy. And then there was the other aspect, which was the, how much power we can get from wind. As Stephen said, we had done some analysis, but that analysis is dated. We did it sometime around 2015, and we assessed that by 2050, we will have something like 9 terawatt on a conservative basis of wind power. Today, we are approaching 650 gigawatt of wind. So in the so 650 gigawatt is almost like near to 1 terawatt. So we will have 9 to 10 times more wind power by 2050. So that was our assessment, and that was based on our study of the grids across the world as well as the wind resource. So I thought that would just address some of the issues that have come up during the talk just now. Now I'll give you a presentation which is on what is happening in wind energy in India, South Asia, and the ASEAN region. Typically, these are regions which are tropical or subtropical, and these regions have been known to be not so windy. The wind speeds are not very high in these regions compared to wind speeds that you will get in north of England, or you will get north of Germany. In the offshore areas, you will get wind speeds of around 10 meters per second at the hub height of wind turbines. But here in India, we get wind speeds of around 7 meters per second most of the time. And if we go into the offshore, we may get around 8 meters per second or 9 meters per second. And the same holds for the other countries, though we have pockets of very high wind speeds. Some of these pockets in south of India where we have very high wind speeds, or in the state of Gujarat in India, or for example, in parts of Sri Lanka, or some other parts of the world in this region, we otherwise have somewhat lower wind speeds. But here I will show you something which has been happening in the technology. This is the structure of my talk, so I just forgot to mention it. So in terms of what is happening to the technology, if you look at the lower side of this trend, which I have shown, we have wind turbines which were around being installed about 15 years back. They are even now installed if somebody wants to install them in terms of cost and everything, if it works out. But the general trend is that we are moving towards higher and larger machines. So if you see, the yellow bars are all rotor diameters, and the red bars, they are all heights of the wind turbine. So both of them have generally increased significantly. And this means what? This basically means that the same, for example, a 2 megawatt wind turbine, which I was installing about 2 years back, would not be very feasible in some areas, is now feasible in many more areas. A larger and larger geographical area is coming into our ambit, where we can set up large wind farms. And this is because of this technological change which is happening with larger hub heights and larger rotor diameters. This is just one of the graphs I thought I will show you. And So if we look at like Stephen has shown you for the whole of the world, I'm just showing you for the South Asian region and the ASEAN region, which is not very much known for so much wind farms. Many people wouldn't know that there is wind turbine in a country, very small country like Bhutan, that there is a country like Bangladesh, which is contemplating setting up something like larger wind farms. That Sri Lanka has been in this business of wind energy for almost 10 years now. And uh, they do not have a very large capacity in Sri Lanka, but they do have, if I look here, they have something like 130 megawatt. So, but these things are changing now because, as I said, the technology is changing. What was not feasible yesterday is feasible today. So, as you see, India today, we have something like 37 gigawatt of wind power. And India started very early. And Stephen mentioned that I was with wind energy in 1985. So at that time, uh, there was hardly any wind turbines in China, which are now like something like 250 gigawatt. And actually, China started making these wind turbines and installing them sometime in 2006, 2007 onwards. And India used to be number 3 or number 4 country and still is number 4, I think, after Germany and Spain. And after India, you see we have other countries, which is Vietnam. Um, they also started very recently and they have something like 388 megawatt of wind power. Thailand has more than 1,000. It has 1.5 gigawatt of wind power. Sri Lanka, as I said, 130 megawatt. Pakistan started hardly 2 years back, and they have 1,200 megawatt to 39 megawatt. Indonesia, it's completely tropical islands with less wind speeds. They already have 142 megawatt, and they're planning quite significant capacities. Philippines has 427 megawatt, and I think Philippines will grow much more because there are good wind sites also in Philippines. Bhutan is a mountain Himalayan country, and they have some wind turbines and they plan more. So a few megawatts more will come very soon. So like this, the technology is spreading across the regions. And as I said, Bangladesh is considering some larger capacities and some analysis and these kind of things are going on. In other countries as well, like Cambodia, Laos, there are different kinds of activities which are happening today. There are discussions, there are proposals for setting up 50, 100 megawatt, 150 megawatt kind of projects. So this is going on. The next is, uh, this is the what has been happening uh, in India. Just a minute. Yeah. So in India, what we had was these, this red box is what shows there was certain different kind of policy which was basically related to, some tax benefits and what we call the accelerated depreciation. And this policy framework changed recently, sometime in 2016-17, when we went in for competitive bidding. So today we have mostly competitive bidding happening across the country, and this other part is not happening. It was a bit related to the all kinds of industries setting up their own units, captive units kind of thing. And this policy framework enabled something like 25 gigawatt of wind power in India. So a lot of investment from within the country. But now we have a lot of funds. We have uh, international funds operating in India through the vehicles, IPPs, and they are bidding for large projects, something like 300, 400 megawatt, 600 megawatt. And these are IPPs. And so there is progress on that front, but there has been a transition in the industry. It has meant employment issues. It has meant that certain companies have been shut down. It has meant that the manufacturing base, which is based in India, has suffered, while those who are operating globally did not suffer that much. All kinds of issues happen, and they whole sector is in a bit of a transition with respect to people and employment and projects, but the growth of the sector continues to happen. And these are the annual installations in India. And you can see in 2017, we hit a 5 gigawatt mark. And then we have gone slow because of the issues related to competitive bidding. These are the statewide installations in India. You see the highest number went sometime in Andhra Pradesh, which is the red bar. We set up 2000 megawatt in 2016 and 17. But if you look at the end of this graph, somewhere here 2019 and 20, most of the wind farms are coming up in high wind areas because of the competitive bidding, obviously. And so we have more wind farms coming up in Gujarat, which is the yellow bar, and the blue bar, which is the Tamil Nadu. So most of project development is now happening in 2 states, and the other states not so much or hardly anything, because competitive bidding requires that you go to the best sites available. So in terms of policy and regulatory transition, I think I've got a message. Let me see. I think I'll just wrap up quickly, rather quickly. So this competitive bidding market, which is today in India, we feel it's a very difficult market, and the supply chain gets orders only when the bids are announced. So till that time, there is nothing that happens there. The MSME, or what Stephen talked about, was the community power kind of thing. It somehow translates into small and medium enterprises in India. They are more or less out of the market, and some major companies like Suzlon have faced difficulties and survival issues, but they are now coming out of it through certain measures that they have taken. The positive side of competitive bidding is that the tariffs have come down, and which means there is a greater acceptance for wind power amongst the buyers of the power, which is the DISCOM, the distribution companies. They buy the power from the IPPs, and there is greater acceptance because the power is now cheaper. And then large funds and IPPs are making investments in a guarded manner. There are issues of payment security. That is, these DISCOMs have to pay back to the IPPs, and this is a bit of a problem because they themselves have some financial issues, and this is a more of an energy sector issue or electricity sector issue rather than the renewable energy. Now, coming to COVID, and I will tell you something very interesting with regard to COVID. And this is that our Prime Minister, Honorable Mr. Narendra Modi, he recently announced that at 9 p.m. in the evening, everybody should shut his electricity, everybody should switch off the lights, and everybody should come out of the house and light a lamp or a candle or something at 9 p.m., which means across the country, the lighting load will go down to 0 at 9 p.m. And after 5 minutes, this was to again come on back. And this was a huge risk for the grid, because if the load goes down, and it actually happened at that time, the load demand on the system went down by 30 gigawatt. 30 gigawatt of power vanished from the load demand side, and it was managed very well. The grid did not collapse, and often we hear from the grid people that renewable energy fluctuates and they cannot accept it, particularly with regard to wind. But we saw that 30 gigawatt was taken out of the system, and it came back onto the system in 5 minutes, and the system was still functioning and everything went well. So it's a good example that this kind of variability or fluctuation in demand, or in power output or generation can be accepted by the system, and it is not a big challenge and technically feasible and been demonstrated. Now with the COVID being there, the demand for electricity has gone down. But the government has ensured that all renewable energy projects, they operate on a must-run basis. So the projects are running, and whatever they generate is fed into the grid, and they will be paid for it. So most of the generation then from the renewable energy is going into the grid, and the operators can visit their sites under provision of essential services, though there is a lockdown in many areas and people cannot go out, but the operators can go out in their areas. So this is what I had to say, and then we can discuss anything further. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chami. That was, I think, a very good, insightful Indian perspective, also with regard to what the role of wind energy is and can be. Now, Thomas, just in between, should we ask for any questions maybe at the end, if there are any? I mean, I think
we have still like 12 minutes.
Yeah, okay,
and
then.
We have Khalid yet speaking, so.
Yes, and I'm, as you may see, I followed your advice, so I have the virtual background now, which sometimes mixes up with my. I'm still trying. Anyway, that was a good tip. Now let's go to North Africa, and not only North Africa, but we go kind of literally to Khalid Ben Hamou, who is the managing director of Sahara Wind. He's been working on that. Khalid, you must help me, but as far as I know, you also, that must be 2 decades now, working on developing wind power and the huge resources that are there in Northern Africa. And Khalid, but you have not only to present us about your home country, Morocco, where you are right now based, but also the whole Maghreb and MENA region. So Khalid, may I invite you to take over?
Thank you very much, Stefan. I'm waiting for the command for screen sharing to be validated on the organizer's side.
The wind people, we are always prepared with all the slides, etc.
Okay.
Okay. So it's going now online.
So I will. Yeah. I'll introduce then wind power markets in the Maghreb and MENA region. In fact, it's an interesting region because it has, I'm going to go very fast through the targets. It has different targets that are very ambitious, and some countries are very mature countries in terms of wind electricity, namely Egypt and Morocco. And what is interesting in the region here is renewable energy transition, which can then enable regional power flows between the North African, Middle Eastern countries, and also with Europe, which will have to decarbonize at some point. And obviously, you have to realize that Europe will have to substitute all its fossil fuel imports by 2050 with renewable energies, renewable electricity. So we've got tremendous interconnection possibilities and wind storage technologies through hydrogen that are likely to be implemented in the coming years, in the near future for some pilot projects, and I'll go over the possibilities in the region. So basically, I'm going to go east to west, going through a variety of countries like Oman, which is implementing its first wind farms with 30% electricity generated by 2030. We know that it's implementing a first wind farm that's been operational in the region. We have Saudi Arabia that has outstanding wind resources. A very ambitious 9.6 gigawatt renewable energy by early on, and some wind projects with outstanding record low level LCOE prices have been attributed. They are being built. So what is interesting here is to know whether the COVID will in fact, knowing the price of oil, recent drop of price of oil, will enable this country to invest heavily in renewable energies as it has planned. And what is interesting here, there is already HVDC interconnection between Egypt and Saudi Arabia that's being planned, enabling then the power sharing renewable electricity from one country to another and enabling both energy systems to be optimized. We know that the wind resource is located along the Red Sea. You can see here the best wind regimes in the region. And both countries are then going to tap and help each other. We know that there is obviously load differences, peak load differences that can be utilized on the regional level. What is interesting to note on the Egyptian wind energy sector is that you have a variety of projects that have been implemented with a gradual consolidation of a few large manufacturers, which then will transfer manufacturing capacities in the region. And you've got also a very 4 gigawatt pipeline of projects, either under development. Some of them are under construction, and that will increase tremendously the wind sector in Egypt, which is thriving. The key question here would be to know whether by 2023 those targets can be met. Jordan has a little lower wind capacity installed. It invested obviously in solar and wind as well, and it banks on governance and financing schemes to meet its target. If you look at the situation with Tunisia, it also looks at the private sector. Its wind potential has been lowered. Its wind program is rather low. The last wind farms have been reached operational operation in 2013. So some of them have also some maintenance problems, but the targets are going to be met with both public and private capacities with the schedule that is likely to be maintained through 2030. Algeria is an interesting story because it's got very small wind capacity. It's got the potential and very ambitious targets for 2030, mostly met by PV, but wind will have a quarter of that ambitious 22 gigawatt target, which translates into a 5 gigawatt objective by 2030. The key again will be to know whether Algeria will be able to meet this target, knowing the financial constraints that the oil market currently has. Algeria's main export revenue comes from natural gas, and politics will also be playing in that equation, whether the government will be pushing for renewable energy, which is likely to happen. And then we have the two interesting markets, namely because they share wind potential, Morocco and Mauritania. So Morocco has a variety of different frameworks, has been implementing wind projects for some time, and has fine-tuned its support for projects through either public-private partnerships or renewable energy feed-in law, enabling energy-consuming industries to be supplied by private renewable energy suppliers using the grid as a platform. So basically, by 2022, Morocco is going to double its wind capacity. And what is interesting in this market is to note the local content, which is increasing to 70% thanks to a blade factory and towers that are built locally. But what is interesting in this market as well is to note that with Mauritania sharing a similar wind resource, you're going to have some interesting developments that are going to happen, namely both in the interconnection possibilities, feeding power to North Africa and Europe, enabling exchanges to Europe, and implementing also power to X scenarios. So what is interesting to note here is that, first of all, power to X is not only power to hydrogen. Morocco is using wind energy for desalination plants on the Sahara Desert. It feeds also resilient agriculture. So that is interesting because the area can produce crops at any times in the season and dispatch these crops into markets all the way from Europe to sub-Saharan Africa. And obviously for Morocco, where the majority of wind is operational on the trade wind blown region using the Atlantic trade winds. So basically the challenge will be to feed not only North African load centers, but enabling exchanges with Europe, but also connect that load with the sub-Saharan Africa markets. So there is an interconnection with Mauritania that's being currently built. The interesting thing with agriculture is that because of the trade winds, the region disposes of 72% of the world known phosphate reserves, and this is an essential element in food security. And so what is interesting here is to produce fertilizer, you need to produce ammonia as well. Morocco has 20% of the world export fertilizer market and imports a lot of ammonia. So this can be then substituted using wind energy to produce green ammonia and produce also phosphoric acid, which is how fertilizer take up the fertilizer, the phosphate for the plant. And equally, you can use the direct reduction of iron ore into carbon emission-free steel in Mauritania. Mauritania's main export is iron ore, and so you can use these technologies to produce carbon-free steel. What is interesting in both cases is that the technologies are scalable, and again, if you're using wind energy compared to, let's say, Morocco has for 2030 5 gigawatts of wind, 5 gigawatts of solar energy planned. Well, the 5 gigawatts of wind produce 3 to 4 times more electricity in terms of megawatts or gigawatt hours compared to solar PV. So that's the big advantage of wind, is really how much you can produce. And if you can produce as much, then you're obviously going to be able to produce green molecules, which are going to be integrated to regional power transfer schemes. You noted before the challenge of having power fluctuations very high, using renewables. And green molecule, the Power-to-X industry, is likely to smoothen that curve. And so that's how I'd like to conclude the presentation, knowing that in Europe, obviously, Europe will need to substitute its electricity with green electricity, but Power-to-X enables also a variety of other sectors to decarbonize and substitute, obviously, huge amounts of fossil fuel imports by Europe, which North Africa can produce at record low costs. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'm open to questions.
Actually, I'm very sorry because we have still 3 minutes. Unfortunately, we have foreseen only 1 hour. If I knew that wind is so interesting, we would put more, you know.
We started a bit late, but I understand that we are suffering from others, so we must stop here.
But you know, Stefan, I think that from my side, before you conclude, I would like that we organize something together, you see, more in detail, if you agree. Yes, we can organize in a very short future because it's a new topic for us, but it's very interesting. And today, unfortunately, we have to stop. Yes, and I'm very sorry for that.
Khalid, just stop sharing your screen, please, because we can
yes,
still see what you do.
Actually,
it's on top. Just on top, there is a red, should be, yes, very good. Good. Thomas, I don't see any questions here from, we have now some participants, but there are no questions.
Solar Mama.
Ah, hello.
So we have last 2 minutes, Mary, so I'm very sorry. But yes. Let me just introduce, so Mary is the only woman in the United States who owns on private wind farm, 7 megawatt, and we have to finish in 3 minutes. But
so that is related to what I explained. Obviously, community power. So that is great. Private investment, we're very happy to be with you today, Thomas. I think you got an idea. Unfortunately, our one speaker from the industry, from European industry, he couldn't make it. Otherwise, I think it would have been even a bit broader. But I think
it's even better, because in this case we need to organize one more, so we can analyze CC more in details. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we took more time as we knew that we have more time. But I think you got a taste of how also diverse the wind sector is, and in how many countries. Although we have heard from many countries, but of course that's just a small portion of the whole world. Wind energy is there. It will have to play a role, and maybe you also got some new ideas. I think it was very interesting what Khalid mentioned about industrial purposes. Certainly that is something only few people have started thinking of, and we're happy to be with you. Also, if any of your audience has any questions after you have this webinar on YouTube, we're happy to answer them. So please forward questions to us. And
Yes.
we wish you good luck for the rest of
Thank you
your...
so much, Stefan. And I'm very sorry, yes, because if I knew that it will be so interesting, we would foresee in 1 hour and a half. But I said, okay, first time, I don't know, we don't know the topic. So, but you see, like I always say, together we are stronger. And we will organize something together. And also we have, on Friday, we have session about Morocco. And if Khalid would like to take a part, I will introduce you to Dr. Zineb, who will be who is managing this session, and also to our chair Mostafa, and because we will have Minister of Energy joining, so we can start to see our cooperation like this. So we can give the floor also to your colleagues during Friday, but it will be in French. Yes, so just if you can speak French. So thank you so much. I'm very sorry for the. But you see, like this is the proof that we should work together, and that together we are stronger. And Stefan, I know that with your organization, you are always making all the job like this. Yes. So I'm very happy. Yes, that because you see, we just only enjoyed the party, but today we also worked. So thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, Dr. Yami, and it was really a pleasure. And Solar Mama, sorry, but we'll give you the floor later.
Special greetings to the US.
Okay, so let's just give 2 minutes to Solar Mama. Storage people, they will kill me, but okay.
Thank you.
So because Mary is 6 a.m. in Boston, but she said I would like to be with my wind friends, because you see she was so crazy to build these wind farms, and I visited actually this. She has like a green farm and wind mills. Yes. so let's Mary. So I give you a task, okay, to organize with Stefan together one longer session, at least 3 hours. Then we can tackle with all the regions with wind energy. And also we can discuss together how to work together. And you are always welcome in our CleanTech Business Club as a personality, and also all your friends. Thank you so much, Stefan.
Thank you for the background.
You always make thumbs up, yes.
And you see, it's not yet 100% working, but I have some.
Yes.
It's virtual now. It's virtual.
Okay. Thank you so much, and take care, guys. And it was really interesting. And
thank you. Thank you so much, and good luck for the remaining webinars.
Thank you.
Bye to India, Morocco, and US.